And welcome to Cultural Wealth Wednesdays. I'm thrilled you joined us today for what I believe will be a transformative conversation about recognizing, honoring, and leveraging the incredible assets that exist within our diverse communities. I'm Dr. Crystal L. Clemens, founder and CEO of Our Village Consulting, and I've dedicated over 15 years of my career to a simple but powerful belief. Every student, every family, and every community possesses incredible wealth that, when recognized and cultivated, can transform educational outcomes. As someone who has spent my career in school counseling and counselor education, I've witnessed firsthand how traditional deficit-based thinking can limit our vision of what's possible. But I've also seen the magic that happens when we shift our perspective to recognize the cultural wealth that surrounds us every day. Cultural Wealth Wednesdays is our weekly space to explore, celebrate, and learn how to leverage the diverse forms of capital that exist in our communities, what researcher Terry Yasso calls community cultural wealth. We're talking about the aspirational capital that drives families to dream big for their children, the linguistic capital found in multilingual households, the familial capital that creates strong support networks, the social capital built through community connections, the navigational capital that helps families persist through challenges, and the resistant capital that emerges from communities advocating for change. Each Wednesday, we'll dive deep into practical strategies for identifying cultural wealth in your school or community, building authentic partnerships that honor diverse perspectives, creating programming that builds on existing community assets, challenging systems that perpetuate deficit thinking, and developing your own cultural competence as an educator or leader. Cultural Wealth Wednesdays isn't just about changing how we think. It's about changing how we act. It's about building the kind of inclusive, asset-based educational communities where every child can thrive. So let's begin this journey together. Let's challenge ourselves to see wealth where others might see deficits. Let's build bridges where others might see barriers. Let's create the villages our children deserve. Welcome back to Cultural Wealth Wednesday. Today we are going to discuss the sixth and final form of cultural capital, which is resistance capital. Now, today's topic will challenge those of you who are leaders most directly. This is really going to step on your toes because we're discussing how opposition, critique, and resistance represent organizational assets rather than problems to manage. Resistance capital refers to knowledge and skills fostered through oppositional behavior that challenges inequity and inequalities. This includes a legacy of resistance to subordination, skills developed through social justice work, understanding of power dynamics and institutional change strategies, and the commitment to transforming inequitable systems. Traditional leadership approaches often view resistance as a problem. The difficult employee, the critical parent, difficult student, right? The activist community member. Cultural wealth approaches recognize that these resistance skills represent sophisticated institutional intelligence about equity, justice, and organizational transformation. Here's the insight. People who have had to resist oppression understand power dynamics, institutional change strategies, and equity barriers in ways that people who've never been marginalized simply cannot. Their resistance capital is organizational wealth that can transform institutions from reproducing inequality to advancing justice. Research on organizational change consistently shows that external pressure and internal advocacy, both forms of resistance, are often more effective at driving institutional transformation than top-down reform efforts. Resistance capital accelerates necessary change. So think about the group of parents, those of you who are in schools, who got tired of their kids coming home with too much homework. And they organized other families to advocate for policy change. They researched homework best practices, they presented their evidence to the school board, and they mobilized community support. These organizing skills, research, the coalition building, strategic advocacy, all of these are forms of resistance capital that can benefit many school improvement efforts. Think about the employees who noticed that the promotion decisions consistently overlooked women and people of color. So they started documenting patterns and presenting data to HR. Their resistance to inequitable practices developed analytical skills, evidence documentation expertise, and change management knowledge that could improve organizational systems broadly. Think about the community members who challenged a zoning decision that would have displaced low-income residents. They learned to navigate city bureaucracy, interpret planning documents, mobilize neighbors, and apply political pressure. Those resistance skills represent sophisticated civic knowledge that city government should be partnering with, not fighting against. The teacher who pushed back on district policies she knew harmed students, eventually building enough support that the policy changed. Her persistence and advocacy skills, both form of resistance capital again, improved educational practice for everyone. Resistance capital reveals organizational truths that leaders often miss. See, people who resist inequitable practices understand institutional dysfunction in granular detail. They've analyzed policies to identify discriminatory patterns. They've tracked outcomes to document disparities, and they've identified power dynamics that perpetuate inequality. This knowledge is invaluable for leaders serious about equity. The employee who filed a discrimination complaint understands exactly how your harassment reporting system fails people. The parent who had to fight for appropriate services knows where your special education process breaks down. The community member who organized against your expansion plan understands what community engagement failures cost you. But here's what's challenging for leaders. Resistance capital often comes packaged with criticism, anger, and distrust of authority. People who've been harmed by institutions aren't always polite about pointing out dysfunction. Effective leaders can receive resistance capital as valued feedback rather than personal attack. The question isn't whether resistance is comfortable, it's whether the insights resistance provides are accurate and valuable. Often the answer is yes. The most sophisticated institutional critiques come from people who've experienced institutional harm and developed resistance capital in response. So how are we going to leverage this resistance capital? First, formal pathways for resistance knowledge to inform institutional decisions. Advisory councils made up of people who have experienced institutional barriers, community organizing partnerships where you learn from advocacy groups, or policy development processes that include people who've historically resisted your institution's practices. When designing your complaint process, include people who have filed complaints and experienced the system's failures. When developing equity policies, partner with employees who've organized for workplace justice. When revising enrollment procedures, involve families who have advocated for better access. Secondly, you need to compensate resistance expertise appropriately. When you ask people to share knowledge that they developed through painful experiences of marginalization, that's emotional labor that deserves and requires recognition and payment. Create paid advisory roles, consulting opportunities, and formal positions that value resistance capital. Protect people who exercise resistance within your organization. If employees who point out inequity face retaliation, you're signaling that institutional loyalty matters more than justice. Create whistleblower protections, anonymous reporting systems, and clear anti-retaliation policies. Make it safe to challenge power, especially in a time where it is unsafe to do so. Be prepared to actually change in response to resistance. If you solicit critiques but don't act on them, you're extracting resistance capital without honoring it, and you are wasting everybody's time. Authentic engagement with resistance means being willing to redistribute power, change policies, and admit when your institution has caused harm. Y'all, let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it real. Resistance capital is uncomfortable for leaders. It challenges authority, exposes dysfunction, and it demands change. Many leaders want the benefits of resistance capital. They want the insights. They want the institutional intelligence. They want the equity expertise without the discomfort of being challenged. But cultural wealth doesn't let leaders have it both ways. If you want to leverage Resistance capital, you have to accept that it comes with critique. If you want to benefit from the knowledge developed through opposition to injustice, you have to be willing to acknowledge that your institution may be perpetuating that injustice. This is where many equity initiatives fail. This is where the performance becomes evident. That it's just performance and not real. The leaders create the diversity committees, the equity task forces, and the community advisory boards, but get all in their feelings when these groups identify institutional problems. They want the appearance of the engagement with the resistance capital without the reality of the institutional transformation. Look at what we are dealing with now. Effective leaders develop the ability to receive criticism as a gift, to understand challenge as commitment, and to recognize that people who care enough to resist are offering you opportunities for improvement that compliant folks won't provide. It's important to remember that resistance capital often comes from communities who have been repeatedly disappointed, devalued, harmed by institutional promises. Distrust isn't irrational, it's earned through experience. Building authentic partnerships with resistance capital holders requires sustained commitment, transparency about power dynamics, and demonstrated willingness to actually change. Over this Cultural Wealth Wednesday series, we've explored 6 forms of cultural wealth that exist in every community and organization: aspirational, familial, linguistic, navigational, social, and resistance capital. Together, these represent a comprehensive alternative to deficit thinking that focuses on what communities lack. Today's Cultural Wealth Wednesday challenge: identify one form of resistance capital in your organization or your community. How might you partner with that resistance to advance institutional justice rather than seeing it as just a problem to manage? This completes our core Cultural Wealth Wednesday series. We will be continuing this series as we explore and dive deeper into applications and intersections of communities and cultural wealth. So subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything in the future. And in the comments, tell us which form of cultural wealth resonated most with you thus far. And share one concrete step that you're taking to recognize cultural wealth in your leadership practice. Let's build a community of leaders who see assets, not deficits, in every community we serve.